June 2005, Seoul, South Korea. It was early summer, and the heat was beginning to settle in. Hongundong neighborhood, Seodaemungu district. Nestled at the foot of Bukhansan Mountain, this neighborhood sits close to the city center, yet feels quiet and unhurried. Hiking trails and walking paths extend right behind the apartment complexes, a favorite route among locals. That afternoon was peaceful, as usual, but in the woods, about 10 meters from the trail, was a horrible scene that no one could possibly have been prepared for. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, and streaks of red were spreading in every direction. And there was a man. He was crouched down, doing something. His hands were drenched in blood, and in those hands, he held something that defies description. His eyes held no focus. They looked like the eyes of a wild animal. He stood up calmly and began to wander among the trees, as if there were still things left to do. What on earth was happening in those woods? This is the Hongundong hiking trail murder. You guys know I'm Korean, right? But I was curious about my Korean ancestry. So I finally decided to try a DNA test. I used MyHeritage DNA, and the whole thing was really simple. For only $27, you get a little kit and do a cheek swab. It takes maybe like 2 minutes, and you mail it back. And a few weeks later, your results just appear in your inbox. Okay, let's check the test results. There's a video first. Megan, ready to explore your ethnicity. Okay, let's go. Megan, you are? What? Oh my God, I'm Chinese. 0% Korean. Wow, that's a surprise. And it turns out I have relatives around the world. There's someone from Norway, Austria. I think it's so interesting that you can find people who share DNA with you, like even people with different ethnicities. And there's also ancient origins. So it basically traces your DNA back thousands of years. So here it shows that my ancestors were mostly Yellow River Neolithic farmers. And honestly, this explains a lot. I like routine, I like staying home. Now, not only ancient origins, you can check out your traits. Okay, agreeableness. I am slightly more competitive, which is true. And let's see, creativity is on the lower side. Okay. Monogamy. Wow. Slightly less likely to be monogamous. Okay. Whether this is accurate or not, I think this could be a fun way to strike up a conversation with people. So yeah, this is what you get. Right now, through MyHeritage, you can actually get a DNA kit for just $27, which is much cheaper than most of the other tests out there. So if you've ever been curious about your own background, you can scan the QR code on the screen and use my code MEGAN27. And you can get a 30-day free trial. It was a Sunday, June 26, 2005, an apartment complex in the Hongundong neighborhood, Seoul, a quiet neighborhood tucked beneath the ridgelines of 2 different mountains. The hiking trails connected directly to the back of the complex, a path the residents knew well and loved. At around 4 p.m., a local woman surnamed Kim set out for an afternoon walk. It was a familiar, well-traveled route, and she climbed the trail with no particular worry on her mind. She had been walking for a while, enjoying the cool breeze, when she heard something strange. She couldn't tell what it was at first. She stopped and listened. Then it came again. A woman's scream. Sharp and desperate. It was still broad daylight, but the dense forest canopy made the trail dim. Most hikers had already descended, and the area was sparsely populated. Alone in the quiet shadows of the woods, Miss Kim felt fear closing around her. But the thought that someone might need help gave her the courage to move. She walked carefully in the direction of the sound. About 10 meters into the forest off the main trail, she saw something strange. A man was crouched on the ground, making a pile of leaves with his hands, like someone who had lost their mind. As she watched, she broke into a cold sweat. Between the leaves, she could see a pale white foot. She clapped a hand over her mouth and hid behind a tree. And she quietly took out her phone to call the police. "I'm at the Hohendong Trail. There's a man here. I think he's burying a body," she said. And even after the call, she stayed and watched. The man didn't leave. He kept lingering, pacing around that spot. And he was holding something in his blood-covered hands. Miss Kim was no medical expert, but it looked like he was holding intestines. His eyes were vacant, but he continued to move with purpose around the trees, as if there were still unfinished business. The police arrived, and Miss Kim pointed the man out immediately, and he was arrested on the spot. He smelled strongly of alcohol and was heavily drunk. Police cordoned off the trail and moved to see what they were dealing with. Beneath the pile of leaves, a large mat was covering something. When officers carefully peeled it back, the worst was confirmed. It was a woman's body, and she was completely naked. Blood was smeared across her face and upper torso, and the state of her lower body was unspeakable. An officer looked up at the surrounding trees, and what they saw made everyone freeze. Hanging from the branches were red, glistening objects. Human organs draped across the branches like decorations. Detectives who had worked hundreds of crime scenes couldn't believe their eyes. None of them had ever seen anything like this before. And that was why the suspect had been pacing near the trees. He had been taking the organs and hanging them on the branches to create this horrific scene. The body was sent to the National Forensic Service for an autopsy. The cause of death was a fatal hemorrhage from multiple stab wounds. The victim had been stabbed repeatedly until she bled to death. At the scene, investigators recovered a pair of scissors that were 21 centimeters long. The perpetrator had used them to stab the victim dozens of times in the face, neck, chest, arms, and lower body. The right common carotid artery, the jugular vein, the left lung, the heart, and the liver had all been pierced. The right nipple had been bitten off. Teeth marks were clearly visible. But that wasn't the end. Inside the victim's body, investigators found a 1.8-liter bottle of Ogapi herbal liquor, a 1.5-liter plastic bottle of soju, a plum, and the victim's own wallet. The perpetrator had forced all of these objects inside her. When they couldn't fit, he cut the surrounding tissue with the scissors and pushed them in. The force had caused the internal organs to protrude, and those he had taken out and hung on the tree branches. The victim's identity was confirmed through the ID in her wallet. She was Park, 51 years old, a divorced mother raising 2 children on her own, an ordinary middle-aged woman. So how did this happen? The man arrested at the scene, holding the victim's organ in his hands, was Kim, 46 years old, and he worked in interior renovation in the Hohendong neighborhood. He had a decent reputation at work. Colleagues described him as hardworking and said he rarely complained. He lived quietly, sent part of his paycheck to his girlfriend, and kept his head down. To everyone around him, he seemed like an honest, diligent man. But this was a mask he had been wearing for years. Kim was hiding a past that could never be allowed to surface. A prior conviction for rape and murder of a minor. December 1983, Suncheon City, South Jeolla Province. Kim was 24 at the time, serving in a public service role, an option that can be taken instead of Korea's mandatory military service. One day, he raped a 17-year-old girl who was living next door. Terrified of being caught, he made a monstrous choice. He strangled her to death on the spot. He killed a 17-year-old girl to hide his crime. Kim was soon arrested. At trial, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. However, 17 years into his sentence, Kim was released almost by chance. He was included in a special amnesty that was announced on Buddha's birthday in 2000. Approximately 1,200 model prisoners were designated as eligible for parole, a decision that, of course, drew controversy. The biggest question was whether inmates serving life sentences for murder should be included at all, but the criticisms fell on deaf ears, and a man who had raped and murdered a minor walked back into society. And had he reformed? No. Just 1 year after his release in April 2001, Kim reoffended. He attempted to rape a 21-year-old female employee at the factory where he was working. She fought back desperately, and he was stopped before completing the assault. But during the struggle, he beat her severely. Her face bore the worst of the attack, and she sustained fractures and other injuries that required 3 weeks of medical treatment. Kim was sentenced to 2 years and 6 months imprisonment for aggravated rape. He was released again in June 2003. Profilers who later analyzed the Hongundong case pointed out that Kim's 1983 crime was likely already highly sadistic in nature. And he had a pattern of going AWOL during his public service, suggesting instability well before that. There was every reason to believe Kim's criminal behavior had begun even earlier, at a minimum with sexual offenses, they said. More troubling still was what Kim's criminal record revealed about the justice system's response. There was no serious analysis of how dangerous this man was or why he kept reoffending. He served his time, he got out, he attacked again, and seemingly, no one connected the dots. The 2001 assault was stopped before completion, but it was still an aggravated rape. Then just 2 years after completing his second prison term, he committed the Hongundong murder. As one profiler put it, this was not just recidivism. It was an escalation, biting, tearing, mutilation. He had reached middle age, and he had gotten worse. So let's get to what happened that day. After his release in August 2003, Kim settled into a new life in the Hongundong neighborhood, Seoul. He worked steadily, saved money, and somewhere along the way, he met a woman, Pak, aged 51, divorced, raising 2 children, a high schooler and a college student, entirely on her own. At the time, she was devoted to her kids, and romance was the last thing on her mind. But Kim pursued her persistently, and eventually, she relented. The two began dating quietly, keeping their relationship private. But not long after they started seeing each other, Kim began pushing for marriage. He told her he would be a father to her children, a real devoted one. And he pressed her relentlessly. But Pak didn't want to remarry, partly because of her children, but also for another reason. The more time she spent with him, the more something felt off. She felt discomfort, repulsion, and at times, outright fear. Especially in intimate moments, Kim's sadistic tendencies became hard to ignore. Pak felt it instinctively. This is not someone I want to marry. Meanwhile, Kim was growing increasingly anxious. She kept refusing his proposals, and at the same time, she seemed to be pulling away. Was there someone else? Kim's suspicions started to grow. The relationship began to fracture. Arguments grew more frequent, and they broke up and got back together over and over. And just like that, their relationship was stuck in a vicious cycle. Then came June 26, 2005. About 2 years into the relationship, they went hiking together. The mountain behind the Hohendong apartments, a trail they both knew well. They climbed together, worked up a sweat, and had made it roughly 80% of the way up by around midday. Then, spreading a mat on a small patch of ground around 10 meters off the main trail, they ate the lunch Kim had packed. They also drank a 1.5-liter bottle of soju and a 1.8-liter bottle of okapi liquor. The breeze was cool, and the mood wasn't bad. Then Kim spoke. "I want to spend my life with you. Let's get married," he said. Another proposal. Kim turned him down again. She had already refused him multiple times, but this time, Kim's reaction was different. "What do you mean? Do you know how much I love you?" His voice turned rough. "Be honest with me. There's someone else, isn't there?" He erupted. The insults came pouring out. Pak had endured enough, so she pushed back. "How am I supposed to spend my life with someone who has no real job, no future? If this is how it's going to be, let's just end it," she said. And in that moment, something changed in Kim's eyes. Her words lit something inside him. A single thought took over and crowded out everything else. He slapped her across the face. He kept hitting her and then reached for her throat. Pak fought back with everything she had. Knowing she might die, she threw herself at him and bit into his chest. That was when Kim completely snapped. He reached into his bag and grabbed what his hand found first. The 21-centimeter long scissors, the pair he always carried for work. And he began stabbing her wildly without stopping. Her face, her neck, her chest, her arms, her lower body. She collapsed. She stopped moving. She stopped breathing. But the attack didn't stop. He bit off her right nipple with his teeth. Then he cut open her abdomen. He took the liquor bottles, the fruit, the wallet, and forced them inside her body. When they wouldn't fit, he cut her body with the scissors and pushed them in. From the moment a resident heard the screaming at around 4 p.m. until the police arrived, for around 40 minutes, he moved through the woods, hanging things in the trees, the organs placed on the branches one by one, like one might decorate a Christmas tree. Arrested at the scene, Kim was charged with murder, desecration of a corpse, and attempted concealment of a body. He already had prior convictions for rape and murder, and the brutality of his most recent crime was beyond comprehension. The death penalty seemed likely, but in court, Kim repeated the same thing over and over. He was too drunk to remember, he said. He didn't know what he'd done. He claimed diminished mental capacity. His defense attorney argued that Kim had consumed close to his usual limit that day, shared the alcohol with the victim, and was heavily intoxicated at the time. The defense also highlighted his conduct since he completed his second prison sentence. He had a steady job and had made financial contributions to the victim. It was the appearance of a man trying to reintegrate into society. They pointed to the time and location of the crime, 4 in the afternoon on a trail with regular foot traffic. If Kim's crime had been premeditated, they argued, he would never have chosen somewhere so exposed. The weapon was a pair of work scissors he happened to have with him. So their conclusion was that this was a crime of impulse, committed by a man who snapped after being rejected by a long-term partner. The prosecution pushed back without hesitation. This defendant had prior convictions for rape and murder. He committed this crime not long after his most recent release. If he were not permanently removed from society, he would almost certainly kill again, they stressed. On the diminished capacity claim, the prosecution was direct. After killing the victim, he wrapped her body in a mat and covered it with leaves. A man with impaired judgment does not conceal evidence that methodically. As for the act itself, inserting bottles and a wallet into the victim's body, removing her organs with scissors, and arranging them on tree branches, there were truly no words to adequately describe it. External analysts were even sharper. They stated that the narrative of the quarrel didn't hold together. These were two people in a secret relationship who had gone out together that day. The idea that the victim suddenly began hurling severe insults without provocation didn't fit the context. The claim that wounded pride drove Kim to kill just didn't add up. And the claim of intoxication drew scrutiny as well. Whether Kim drank before or after the killing was never properly examined, and that distinction matters enormously. There are cases where a perpetrator drinks after the act, specifically to establish an alibi. The victim's blood alcohol level was never even checked, despite Kim's claim that they had been drinking together. Experts who analyzed the crime noted it contained multiple distinct psychological elements. The frenzied stabbing could reflect rage. The biting spoke to sexual sadism. The insertion of foreign objects into the body revealed a psychology of domination, a compulsion to degrade the victim as something less than human. And the removal and display of the organs on tree branches was a pattern associated with the most extreme category of violent offenders: sadism, domination, and predatory pathology. All three were present in this single crime. And what made this case even more striking is the absence of any formal psychological profile in the Seoul Metropolitan Police records. A crime this layered should have been studied extensively. Either the analysis was never done or the records were lost. Media coverage was nearly non-existent. The case, it was said, was simply too disturbing to report. After a lengthy trial, the court sided with the prosecution. The killing was acknowledged as impulsive, but the diminished capacity argument was rejected. While the defendant's intoxication was noted, the court found that the deliberate concealment of the body, moving it, covering it with leaves, along with the nature and progression of the crime, did not support the idea that this judgment had been meaningfully impaired. So the sentence was life imprisonment, and Kim appealed. The appellate court upheld the original ruling, and his second life sentence was confirmed. In 1983, he raped and murdered a 17-year-old girl. He served 17 years and was released through a special amnesty. 1 year later, he attacked a 21-year-old woman. He served 2.5 years and was released again. In 2005, he murdered a 51-year-old woman in a way that defies explanation. He got a second life sentence, and under South Korean law, those serving life sentences become eligible for parole review after 20 years. He was imprisoned in 2005, and more than 20 years have passed. And in March 2026, rumors started, claiming that he had already been released. The most concerning part is that his face, despite the severity of his crimes, has never been made public. So if he's out there, no one has any way of identifying him. Someone in Seoul could be walking past him at this very moment, with no idea about his gruesome past. There are strong arguments for prison being a tool for rehabilitation, and once someone has served their time, the theory is that they should start with a clean slate. But the reality for some offenders is very different. Kim committed crimes after both of his first 2 prison terms. Who is to say this time will be any different? We can only hope the rumors are just that, rumors. That is all for today. Thanks for watching. Before you go, if you are curious about your own DNA, scan the QR code or check the link below, and use my code Megan27 for a 30-day free trial.